In this video, we're going to be breaking down 5 mistakes that every single support player makes, and these are things that are preventing you from climbing. And while the support role can oftentimes feel hopeless, where you don't feel like you have an impact over the game, supports can actually have some of the highest impact when played properly. So let's break down all the things that you need to do right so that you can start to dominate and climb. Now I'm going to be streaming live right now, going over tips, playing some games, doing some VOD reviews, so make sure you check out the stream right now down below, and let's get started. Now, the first big problem that support players are making is their over-prioritization of healing. And you might be thinking, aren't support players supposed to heal? Isn't that their job? And while you do have one of your jobs being healing, we always have to make this distinction. Supports are not healers, and healing is only one facet to the many things that a support player has to juggle if they want to be successful. Now, a secondary problem to this is back in Overwatch 1, if you outputted a ton of healing, you could oftentimes completely carry fights if you were very efficient at doing so, and you got rewarded oftentimes for just spreading out a ton of healing and sustain to your team. But in a 5v5 format, that's simply not the case. There's more than enough healing to go around. Your tanks will often either die by some set cooldown, or they'll be unkillable regardless of all the attention you're putting onto them, and a lot of your impact is going to be found in other ways, notably ability plays and damage. First off, let's talk about ability plays and how supports have the most impactful abilities in the game. Let's think of the most powerful abilities that we see. Things like Suzu, things like On a Nade, Sleep Dart, Speed Boost from Lucio, Res from Mercy, not to mention damage alteration like Damage Boost from Mercy or Discord. There's a ton of really powerful abilities in the support role, and these are what you can utilize to create teamfight advantages and even completely carry. Out of my many support VOD reviews, the one thing that is always true, regardless of the support that I VOD review, is that their ability use is often done lazily without specific intent, or there was a better situation in front of them that they could have used it for. Try not to use every bit of your utility defensively, and look for offensive plays as well. And if you're having trouble carrying fights, oftentimes ability use is the first thing that you need to look at. Now, I did actually slip in damage here, and damage is super important. Not for every support, but for the vast majority of them, they can do a metric F-ton of damage, like just a ridiculous amount. Think about Ana being able to 2-tap a Tracer. A lot of DPS can't 2-tap a Tracer from any range, I might add. Think about Zen, who can actually shred tanks better than most DPS. Lucio, who can 1v1 the majority of the squishy cast if played correctly. The list goes on and on with how much damage-based impact you can get with these characters, and this is the big reason why supports can carry incredibly hard when mastered, because in many ways they can damage near a lot of their DPS counterparts, they can heal, which DPS cannot do, and their abilities are some of the most powerful in the game. So when you can properly balance all three, contributing ability impactful plays that will actually save your teammates or create huge potential for team fight wins, when you're effectively putting in damage, getting key pickoffs, contesting targets by pumping damage into them, and then healing when you have to, you get to fulfill so many different things, and the impact that you can have over the course of the game can be massive. But it does require you to juggle a lot of things, have good mechanics, and balance your damage with your healing and your abilities that oftentimes are difficult to maximize. So I'm not telling you it's easy, I'm just saying that it's possible. And I would say that supports can have some of the highest possible impact in the game, but I think personally they are the hardest role to master and the most punishing for making mistakes. And next up, this is the second biggest mistake that support players are making, and it's the over connection to their tank. And yes, I understand that it is your job as a support to make sure that your tank is healed up, relatively high health total, and capable of fighting on the front line. But it's also important for you to understand that because there are two of you, you don't necessarily need both of your attention to be devoted all to healing on that one tank at all times. Now, in a very attrition heavy fight, something that is very pokey, something that is very brawly, think Orisa versus Orisa, having supports actually there to bail their tank out of danger, especially with cooldowns, is going to be a very important thing. But especially when you're starting to play more dive-esque characters, or potentially characters that don't need immediate bailout every single moment, characters like Diva, or how about a character like Roadhog that has his own form of sustain, and your abilities are more important on him oftentimes than your healing? a support can go for one, aggressive plays, or split the attack with their other DPS. So this means that, like a Mercy hypothetically, instead of staying near their tank and connected to the tank all the time, if their DPS is going on an off angle, going for a high ground, going for a flank, oftentimes you can go with that DPS to ensure that they don't get pushed off of the off angle very easily, to make them more effective. As a Zen, you can go in and make an aggressive flank with another DPS just to enable that DPS a bit more. You can think of it like you're pushing to the far right, but the DPS is actually pushing in, and you have a line of sight to the enemy so you can do damage, and a line of sight to your DPS so that you can keep that Harmony Orb on him. You're still pretty much out of the fight, really far away, playing a far effective range, but you're not playing behind your tank with your tank all the time. Basically, you have to kind of adopt a more aggressive centric mindset and understand key moments when splitting yourself or going with other teammates or splitting yourself from that primary tank is actually the main role. Because think about it this way, if the goal or the win condition of the fight is like to get a pick off on the enemy backline, let's say it's an Orisa versus Orisa match, hypothetically, and they're just brawling at the front line, trading utility, both of them are playing pretty passive. Oftentimes, one, you could be pretty vulnerable as a support if you're playing directly behind your Orisa, because the other Orisa will look for an opportunity to ignore your Orisa and go kill you. I know this because I did this a lot when I climbed a GM on tank. I oftentimes waited for their Orisa to blow cooldowns and then just go kill their support. But the more frustrating situation, and the thing that you can actually do to contribute to the team fight, is help initiate or help execute a game plan made by your DPS and potentially your other support, probably your DPS. If they're going for a backline play, like hypothetically they're going to go duel a support or someone in the backline, you're taking a more aggressive angle away or adjacent to your tank, or a back angle like an adjacent angle to the far right or left of your tank, so that you have a sight line on your DPS in the backline, can allow you to execute a game plan and kill the opponent, or enable your DPS to kill the opponent. I mean, you're doing a lot of the heavy lifting here by enabling that, and that's the way that you win the team fight. You don't win the team fight always by just being that perma pocket to your tank. In fact, the vast majority of players probably pocket their tank way too much. And I'm not saying ignore your tank or don't heal them or anything like that. I'm just saying that there is always more that you can do, and oftentimes the win condition of the fight doesn't line up with you just being that perma pocket to a tank that isn't making any plays, isn't going proactive, isn't carrying the game. There's a lot of things that you need to consider here. Like I said, not easy, but important to think about. Now, shifting away from more abstract concepts and into more definitive tips, ultimate usage is a big mistake that a lot of support players have, where they use their ultimate incorrectly. You got to understand that just like with abilities, ultimates from supports are some of the most powerful in the entire game, and you can use them to snowball fights, turn to lost team fights, or just generally combo. And here's the thing that you need to understand. If your opponent is oftentimes setting up in a situation where they are not full grouped, but they're too close, or they're close enough to where if y'all wanted to, y'all could push forward and take a team fight, there are ways in which you can utilize your support ultimates to force that team fight and basically wipe the enemy before they're fully regrouped. Like, let's say you and several other players start pushing forward to go wipe like a slightly regrouping enemy team, and you invest a nano into that pre-fight, because the idea is you beat them and kill them before they even have a chance to actually have a full fight or ultimate back onto you. You can also do something like a Kitsune Rush, or even a beat, hypothetically, depending on if there's something that's worth countering, or if you have a certain amount of communication so that you can get guaranteed value out of it. But the point here is that ultimates oftentimes are used reactionarily as a support. I see way too many supports use only their ultimates in response to the enemy pushing in as a 5v5, the enemy pushing in with ultimates, or one of their teammates being weak. And this is where you see rushes where players already gotten picked off, or rushes that don't win team fights, or beats that come after multiple teammates have died, or a Mercy ult that wasn't done before when your teammates were in the poke phase so that it could get more value. It was done afterwards, where the opponent has already basically won the fight on paper and the ultimate was wasted. You see support ults not actually contributing a lot of the time to successful team fight wins when they really should be. And it's oftentimes because that defensive passive nature that I think players are bringing from Overwatch 1, they're coming and taking it into Overwatch 2, and it really wasn't good in Overwatch 1, but it was more forgivable. But especially now, You need to start thinking about how can you use your ultimate to win a fight before it starts. How can you be proactive with your ultimate use so that the opponents are the one on the back foot trying to potentially ult defensively and it's too late for them? And most importantly of all, how can you prevent yourself from investing ultimates in a fight that on paper you already have a huge disadvantage in, and your support ultimate would not make up that disadvantage, and it's far safer for you to just reset and use it in the next fight. Now, the fourth mistake that every single support makes is positioning poorly throughout the fight. And this one is a pretty difficult concept to get right, but if you do, you will become a support carry god. I often tell players when they're in a good position, let's say it's an Ana player, in a good position, healing from a good position, periodically throughout the fight, in between you doing your job, whether that's healing your team, trying to make pickoff plays, or go for a nade here or there, whatever the case may be, you need to constantly be thinking, should I be repositioning? Should I be repositioning here? Should I back off the cart? Should I back up to this location? Basically, at every stage of the game, as opponents move up, as your team moves in, as people are weaker or less weak, your position can get relatively more aggressive, more defensive, back up. And the thing about this that's so important is that supports are some of the most punished for having bad positions. Now, I know this is kind of brutal to say. We've gone over a million things why supports have to prioritize healing, and they have to do damage, and they have to make crazy ability plays that are not hard to use, and they have to have perfect ultimate use, and they have to constantly reposition. Like, I get this is a lot to do, and it's very difficult, I understand. But you have to understand that if you could do these things, your impact over the game can be so freaking massive. So here's what you do. Every single time a teammate dies, or an opponent dies, or an ultimate is used, or a key ability is used. I would say key abilities, like abilities that can have a huge impact over the fight. Think Suzu, Nade, Amp Up, maybe Hook on a Roadhog. There's several different ones. I could probably list out a whole bunch of them, but when any of those key set pieces happen, think about if your position is safe still, and if it's not, back up and reposition. Or think about, are you okay to push further ahead and take a more aggressive angle? And if you do this every single time one of those happen, you'll constantly be repositioning throughout the game, and eventually you're going to get more comfortable with doing things in between your reposition. Shooting out a heal, or throwing a heal orb, or doing a heal-based activity, or a damage-based activity, or an ability-based activity in between your repositioning. So then you're putting yourself in a very hard position to punish, you're never going to die, and you're still contributing to team fights consistently. That sounds like a recipe to carry to me. Now, last but certainly not least, we got to talk about those terrible mid-fight ability usages. And just like with the ultimates, there are so many very powerful abilities that are just used terrible. Especially Nade, Amp, Suzu, to name a few. But realistically, every single support ability is not getting as much value as it should be. So you've seen this often, where maybe a Suzu cleanses a tank that is near full HP but is antied. Or it wakes up a sleeping target when you wake up that target and that target gets naded or hooked or actually threatened. It's important for you as a Kiriko player or whatever support you are to make sure that you 100% have to invest these abilities. And there's way too many times where abilities are felt or used in a very reactionary way. So someone gets naded, okay, insta-Suzu. Someone gets CC'd, insta-Suzu. Someone gets damaged a little bit, insta-Suzu. Or the same thing with nade. Someone pushes up, instant nade. Someone is slightly weak, instant nade. I've taken some damage, instant nade. Or my team is a little low, I'm gonna amp up. You see how all this stuff is done so reactively without thinking, is it necessary? Do I need to do this? Can I just heal them? Can I just focus them? Are they actually in a bad position? Because oftentimes, when you waste these cooldowns, that leaves a huge vulnerable situation for you and your team where an opponent can actually make a play off of that. And while maybe the players in your rank right now aren't punishing you as severely as they could be, as you start to climb and improve on support, players will be looking and waiting for you to waste these cooldowns, calling them out, and actually punishing you over and over again for it. So I want you to really hyper evaluate your ability use throughout the mid fight. Make sure that you're not being too reactionary with each one of these abilities. And every single time you have a game where you felt like you couldn't do anything, or maybe a game that you lost, if you go back in your VODs, I want you to go through this checklist, this 5 checklist of things. Your ultimate use, how were they? How did you reposition throughout the fight? What was your mid-fight ability usage? How loyal were you to your tank? Did that actually contribute to you winning the game? Did your DPS ever go for plays that you didn't help enable? And did you over prioritize your healing over your ability plays or your damage? These are the 5 things that I see most VOD reviewing and coaching support players. But if you see anything else, definitely let me know down below, and make sure you check out that stream. I'm gonna be streaming right after this video goes live, so go check it out right now down below. If I'm not live and you're seeing this later, smash that follow and subscribe. But I'll see you next time.